My name is Mahikamohteu, which is my Cree name. And my Cree name means walking wolf. My English name is Willie LittleChild. And my boarding school name is EIRS number 65. And I tell you that for a particular reason that I'll come back to in relation to my story. I was born on an Indian reserve in Canada, Treaty 6 territory. I'm a Cree, and I've lived all my life on the reserve. And when I was 6 years old, I was taken away from my grandparents who were raising me at the time, and I was put into a residential school. The residential school is like the boarding school experience here in the United States. And I spent 14 years in residential school. Sometimes I was there all year because my grandparents couldn't take care of me in the summertime. So I ended up in a situation. You may have heard that recently there have been almost 15,000 lawsuits of what happened in the residential schools in Canada. A tragic story about physical abuse, mental abuse, spiritual abuse, cultural abuse, and worst of all, sexual abuse. Because literally we were removed from our parents, or grandparents, or whoever was our protector and put into these institutions. But not to dwell on the negative story, I was blessed with a way out. I lived through all of those abuses myself, personally. The sexual abuse, the physical abuse, all of it. But I had a way out to a point where I succeeded in becoming the first Indian to be elected into the Canadian Parliament, the first Indian lawyer in Alberta, the first lawyer to argue cases at the United Nations. I've appeared in front of the Supreme Court of Canada. All this I owe to sports. That's what made me survive. So I was so happy and delighted this morning to hear the story about gymnastics and how it benefits people. The gymnastic festivals that I'm familiar with. Trampoline, not so much. The highest I ever got was in the provincial championships, which is like the state championships. I got a bronze in trampoline once, so I'm connected to bouncing as well. My sport background is hockey, ice hockey. I've been blessed to play in 8 World Cup tournaments in 9 different countries. I've won part of a team winning 5 gold medals, 2 silver and a bronze in ice hockey at the world level. I played baseball, AA baseball in Jamaica. I now swim as a senior athlete. I've competed in the World Masters Triathlon, 6th in the world in that. But I still swim, and thanks to all of this to sport, that's why I believe so much in giving back to the community. Sport saved my life. So in 1971, I had this idea about Indigenous games. Why don't we hold Indigenous games? So I started the Summer Games in Alberta, which is a competition of 13 different sports, about 3,000 athletes. Then it grew to an idea of Western Canada Games, and then the North American Games, and now the World Games. So this story goes on, and it's going to become a reality in 2015. Because on August 27, 1977, at the World Conference of Indigenous Peoples, I proposed a resolution that we should have World Games, Indigenous Games, partially modeled on the Olympic Games, but maintaining our cultural survival in a way through our traditional games. Because I saw the value of sport and games to myself. I saw the other side. The highest suicide rates in the world are in my communities. The highest alcohol, and drug addiction rates. The highest, by the way, in tuberculosis, it's 99 times in the northern communities in the national average. It's 33 times the Canadian average in the First Nations community. So thank you to your revolutionary work that you're doing on tuberculosis and others, of course. So I have a lot to be thankful for. Thanks to Jean for convening us together here, because I owe so much to sports. So to pay back, the resolution in Sweden was immediately adopted, and we should have these games, traditional games in sports competition at a global level. But not realizing it's going to take an awful lot of money, an awful lot of work, a lot of infrastructure globally to hold such an event, we decided to go regionally, first of all. And I proposed that we hold the North American Indigenous Games. That grew from 3,000 athletes in 17 different sports in Alberta in 1990. And the highest number we had was in Minnesota, when we had the games in Minnesota. We had over 10,000 competitors come together. So when you talk about the gathering of nations, it's culture and sport that has been able to gather that many Indigenous peoples in North America. Nothing else has been able to do it. Conferences, nothing else. Politics, nothing else. It was sport and culture that has been able to gather us back together. So in Minnesota, we had 7,500 athletes competing in 17 sports. We had 2,500 cultural participants, because we believe that it has to be both sport and culture. That was the original Olympic ideal. I remember when President Samraj, the late His Excellency Samraj of the International Olympic Committee, we talked about this, and I showed him this video, and he said to me, you know, you are the only people today who are living the original Olympic ideal. You have sport and you have culture. That's why I wanted to show a part of this. If we can show a part of it, this is the third Indigenous Games, but you'll see we've incorporated our culture into the games. Now this bundle, this gentleman is running with, whoops, can you stop that right there? I want to tell you that story. If you can just move it back. We had a ceremony to start the games on a sacred site in Wyoming. And we had a relay team of young people run. This young man actually is my nephew, and as you see, he's running with a bundle. That's a medicine bundle. At the meeting in Kiruna in Sweden, an elder came to me after the resolution was adopted, and he gave me an arrow, and he said, this is a medicine arrow. I want you to have it because I believe the games need to happen. But that arrow, he said, if you're going to hang it, always hang it with an arrowhead facing down. If you're going to have it in your office or somewhere else, make sure it's pointing down, he said, because all the negative energy around the world will be captured by that, and that arrow will shoot that negative energy down to the center of the earth, and there it'll dissipate. So only positive energy prevails. And that's what sport is. That's the spirit of sport, at least to us. So this young man, he ran that bundle from Wyoming to Edmonton. I don't know how many hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles that is, but it's a long ways. So for the last 10 miles of it, his relay run, I mean, Billy Mills and I ran with him for that bundle too, because he ran it into the opening ceremonies. So if you keep it going, you'll see one of the, by the way, these are all teachings. The teepee has instructions. On each pole is a life lesson. It teaches you the principle of life. So it's important that we go back to our cultural teachings during the games. And this is just some scene of the North American Games when they were held in Prince Albert, Saskatchewan. In Edmonton, we had a traditional opening. It's an indoor stadium. I don't know how many thousands of people it holds, but this is what the part of the opening ceremonies where we had different cultural the tribes perform. These are the Inuit throat singers, because we incorporated the Inuit games with it. But you'll see again some shot of the athletes, the size of the participation. So we have also our disabled athletes competing at the same time as the able athletes. We don't separate the Special Olympics, the Paralympics, and the able athletes. We put them all together at the same time. And it's really interesting when we have, for example, the swimming. When they're swimming, you can't tell who's swimming once they're in the water, whether they're able or disabled, because they're so close. And a part of the story, of course, is the Billy Mills, because our Indigenous Olympians are all patrons of the Indigenous Games. And we show this because Billy is very great supporter of the Games. And my connection to him, of course, is not only the sport, but we did a movie on his life. And I did all the business transactions behind that movie. It was nominated for an Oscar, by the way, for the best family. We didn't win, but I think just getting nominated was quite a thing. So here he talks about the importance of traditional games in sport for sovereignty and self-determination. He's talking about that and encouraging the athletes to participate. And then we have Alvin Morris, who's also a gold medal winner in kayak. By the way, the twin sisters that we had 5 skiers on the Canadian national team at one point, cross-country skiers. And Sharon and Shirley Firth, Shirley, who just sadly passed away this year, but Sharon and Shirley Firth were twin sisters. They represented Canada in 4 Olympics in cross-country skiing. That record held for a very long time until just very recently. That you could represent your country in that many Olympic Games. But we have others. We've had a water polo player for Canada in the Australian Olympics. In London, as was mentioned, there was 3. We had one in boxing, we had one in pentathlon, and we had one in, here's Alvin, he won the gold medal in Los Angeles. Here's one of the scenes of the teams at the entry. Some of the represent. We have teams from each of the states and each of the provinces come to the games. For example, my province, we have 800 seats or spots for Team Alberta, but we have 10,000 children compete for those 800 seats. So it grows into the community level. So we have just a scene of some of the teams that and where they come from. So it's a very big event for us. For many athletes in Indian country, this is their Olympics, because this is the highest level of competition they will get to. Cross country, there's a lot of pride and desire for them to compete at this level or participate at this level. So it's been able to gather, I think when we had the, well, in Minneapolis, the opening ceremonies had over 20,000 people watching in the stands. Denver, Colorado was in the Broncos, where the Broncos played the stadium. That was, I think, half full when it was the opening ceremonies. So all this to say that we could show that Taekwondo, is our Taekwondo. There it is. We have that in our games too. We've had rodeo in there. We change it sometimes to depending on who hosts it. So this is similar to the Brazil Indigenous Games. They started theirs in 1996. Those are all ceremonies, the ones you just saw there with the boats. So maybe I'll stop the video there because I want to talk a little bit more about the World Games, which is very exciting because just recently in Brazil they announced that they were going to host the Indigenous Games. Because this year they're going to hold a World Cup of Soccer, and in 2016 they're going to have the Olympics. So they wanted the Indigenous Games in between those two world events. So it's very important for us to have that announcement because it's going to motivate, I think, a different lifestyle in our communities. Not one where people choose death over life, literally killing themselves. I remember one story, I went to a community, and they were honoring their athletes for the Indigenous Games, the medal winners and the participants. And someone was reflecting the story this morning. They had to pause during the ceremonies, and the MC said, well, the band is going to prepare the stage for play for us, their instruments, and warm up a little bit. But if anybody wants to say anything, the mic is open. So we left the mic open. If anybody wants to tell a joke or come and tell a story, whatever. And it was quiet for a while, but a young man from the back of the room came up and he introduced himself. My name is so-and-so. And I was going to kill myself. He said, that's how he opened up. I was going to kill myself. One day I was walking down the road, I was kicking pebbles on the road, and this guy came up beside me and said, hey, what are you doing? I said, oh, nothing. And he said, we're going to have a track meeting, and we're going to try out for the Indigenous Games. You want to come? And he said, nah, I don't think so. So anyway, he decided for some reason to go and try out for the Team Saskatchewan. And as the story, of course, unfolds, he won the 100 meters, he won the 200 meters, and the 400 meters. So he qualified for the Indigenous Games. And of course, he medaled there, and he later got a scholarship. But he said, I'm telling you that to thank you for saving my life. I was going to commit suicide, he said. But the games gave him a choice. He gave him a choice to choose to live. So that's how important. You never know who you will impact, how you will impact. But for me, just to hear one young person say, I chose life, I chose to live, is enough evidence of the value of the games, much like the gymnastics festivals, where you see thousands of people. It doesn't matter what age group, the level of ability, just the fact that they come together to celebrate life. That's what they do. They celebrate life through sport, and in our case, traditional games. So these Indigenous Games that we're going to have in Brazil will be competitive sports, a selected number of sports, but mainly also to showcase to the world our traditional games. And we have many, many, many beautiful participated in a game in Mexico that's still played every Sunday today. And they carbon dated the ball that they play with. And that game's been played for over 10,000 years in that community in Mexico. And it brings the community together. Every Sunday they play that game. There's horse games that we play. There's of course the more common canoeing and archery and I guess our America's kind of games. But we want to be able to contribute to the world and offer our children, our young people, that choice that they can make. They don't have to kill themselves because of the despair in their community, because of the addictions that we have, because of all the negatives, the highest dropouts from school. That just we lead in the world in the negative statistics. One time I was talking about a health conference, and they only gave me so many minutes, and I thought, geez, I better do this fast. And I said, my people were challenged with two very serious situations. And I said, diabetes. And I stopped and I said, wait a minute, I think I just created a new word. What I was going to say was diabetes and obesity. Diabetes. So anyway, that word, one word captures enough why we need to do this, among the other things. Because as a result of these games, we've got instances where people not only got scholarships, they got an education, but they also took a lot of places in our communities of leadership. Either they go back to school, come back as teachers, or they run for office and become chiefs, all of that. Or they grow old and become elders. Whatever it is, we have a very positive opportunity to lift the spirit of our people through sport. For the last 4.5 years, I've been going across Canada as a commissioner of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And this is a commission that was court-ordered after 15,000 lawsuits of abuse from residential school students. The courts literally couldn't handle them. So they called judges together and then the plaintiffs together, and they said, can we settle this out of court? And they agreed eventually. After a long period of time of negotiations, they agreed. The survivors demanded that there be a truth commission established, because this is the saddest and darkest chapter of Canadian history. What happened in residential schools? It was a legislated assimilation policy. The Prime Minister, when he apologized on behalf of Canada to the students, said, the policy admittedly was to kill the Indian in the child. To kill the Indian in the child. So how do you do that? You take them away from their parents, you put them in a boarding school. If they speak their language, you hit them. If they try to perform their cultural teachings, you punish them. You don't allow any of that. You don't let them go home for 10 months or 10 years. Whatever. That had a very, very serious consequence. That's why we lead in the negative statistics. That's why. Why is it that we have 68% of the inmate population as First Nations in all the prisons in Canada? Why is it that the Indigenous women are the majority in prison? Why is it that we're still killing ourselves 9 times the national average? Why is it that we have murdered and missing Indigenous women who are now nearly 1,000 across Canada? I raised this issue, the first time I raised the issue at the United Nations, there were only at that time 250. And that's one is too many. But to have 250 Indigenous women go missing, murdered, nothing is done about it, there's something wrong with that picture. So we've been hearing stories, we've heard over 7,000, or nearly 7,000 students come in front of us, and they tell us what happened to them in residential school. Many times I heard my story being repeated in front of me. I was hearing my own life story. Getting severely punished because you're left-handed. Because if you're left-handed, you were told you're possessed by the devil. You're a devil's child. You're no good. I spent recess time after recess time learning how to write right-handed because I'm left-handed. But they wouldn't allow me to write left-handed. So I wrote right-handed on the board, watching my classmates playing ball outside and having to learn how to write. That might be small in a way, but when you're a little student, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, it comes back to you later as not having been a good experience, a traumatic experience. But anyway, we heard many, many, many stories, many stories. So we concluded early that this policy was actually to directly assault our language, assault our culture, assault our family, and our communities. That's why we have these situations in Canada and US. They're very directly linked to the residential school. So now that we know this story, what can we do about it? So in this spectrum, this journey of truth to reconciliation, there's some missing steps. It's very difficult to ask a person who's been trying to hide this part of his life for 50 years or 60 years to forgive and reconcile. It's very difficult. Some people are so angry they say, I will never forgive anyone. Or they're not even to the stage of health where they can get off Skid Row and come in and tell their story so they can begin their healing journey. But those that have said it's extremely important to be able to forgive. To be able to forgive. Because you need to do that in order for you to heal. And once you've done that, then you can ask for reconciliation to happen. And reconciliation in my language, we have a neighbor city, about 10 miles down the road from the reserve. It's called Wetaskiwin. It's a mispronunciation. It's actually Wetaskiwin, which is a Cree word. And the word means having good relations. That's what reconciliation is about. And through this journey of the sad history of residential schools, there was one bright light all the way through that. And it was sports. It was being able to run away from the abuse through sports, or to be able to run away from the punishment that sport offered a positive experience, so that it made it easier for you to forgive, and it made it easier for you to heal, and now, of course, to reconcile. So through this whole journey of the legacy in Canada, the value of sport in our games has to be allowed to live again, so that more and more people will realize that it's through the medium of sport that makes it easier for us to have better relations and then to have reconciliation. And I close by saying that we lost a great world leader, and the words that influenced me, and I said this, I think the day after he died, in a little message to Jean, that Nelson Mandela, who impacted me when I was a member of Parliament, when he came and spoke to us in Canada, said that sport has the power to change the world. Sport has the power to change the world. And that's what we're trying to do here. To change our world, yes, first of all, because we have to reconcile with ourselves. Me individually with Creator, first of all. Me individually with my family. Me individually with my community. And of course from there it spreads. Because we need that reconciliation between First Nations in Canada and non-Indigenous peoples of Canada. And sport has always been the best and sometimes the only way that healing journey, that path to reconciliation can even begin. So thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for sharing the benefit of gymnastics when you said it. Sometimes you have to make quick decisions. In life, you have to make quick decisions. And it's so true, because sport also is about winning in life. It's not about winning to beat somebody else, but winning over yourself. Because you have 4 elements. You have this wall, maybe the physical element of life. This wall might be the mental aspect of life, the cultural aspect of life, and the spiritual. You need those 4 walls of a foundation. When you have those 4 walls in balance, that's what winning in life is. And that's what sport teaches you. That's what your traditional games instruct us to do. So thanks again for this wonderful opportunity, because we're going to a path here to Brazil, where not only will Brazil change, I think the world will change. Because when Indigenous peoples win, the world wins. So thank you for this opportunity. Hi. No. Thank you.